Well, good morning, everyone. It's so fantastic to all be together to talk about these really incredibly important topics. And so welcome to all of you into this space. I have to say that when Bill and I started the foundation, I wouldn't have guessed that 17 years later, I'd be in an event like this to talk about women and girls. You know, at the time, we were focused on global health and development and how technology and innovations could make people's lives better. And as you're going to hear this afternoon, we're still focused on those things. But I think what we didn't realize yet at the time was how gender equality fits into that equation. It took us a few years and a few great partners and some really amazing teachers before we learned a lesson that the world is slowly waking up to. Gender equality is a prerequisite for progress on every other issue that we all care about. None of us can move forward if half of us are held back. So if you want a healthier, better world, then you need to put women and girls at the center of the agenda. The data tells us this, that women are some of the most important change makers in the world. They help lift their families out of poverty. They create the conditions for a more stable and secure world. They topple barriers, they promote equality at every chance they get. And as you saw in the video, women have become masters of this grassroots change. Now, for most of history, women haven't had access to formal networks of power. So we've learned how to take things into our own hands. It's often out of the spotlight, it's often under the radar, sometimes far away even from a reliable internet connection, if you can believe that. Women's movements have been forging and winning campaigns for a better, more equal future for a very long time. And some of these stories, you may know some of them already. You may know how the US women organized to win the right to vote almost 100 years ago, or how in Liberia they helped end a devastating civil war and brought peace to their country. You may have even been there last January when women peacefully gathered all over the world in cities to insist that their voice be heard in the conversation. But some of the other stories, they may be new to you. How women have organized themselves, like to make sure they get workers' rights in Pakistan, widows' rights in Ethiopia. How they've campaigned to end violence in El Salvador, and how to fight for the rights of people living with disabilities in Indonesia. How in so many places around the world there are women on the front lines in so many ways. They're fighting for this vision that we've laid out at the UN for these future goals, for these global goals. So even so, you won't hear much about these women's movements if you go over to the UN General Assembly Hall this week, because these movements that we're talking about today, they're largely unrecognized and they're very often under-resourced. But that is slowly beginning to change. We're joined today by some of the people who are funding and leading this work. And together, I want us to imagine what it could look like if we tapped into the potential of these women's movements. And we finally started giving them the investments and the full attention that they deserve. What I hope you're going to hear over the next hour are what we're learning from activists and experts and statisticians and great storytellers. We're going to talk about how each one of us can use our platforms to influence and support these movements. We can do that as partners. We can do it as champions. We can do it as advocates. We need to let the world leaders know that if they're serious about creating a better future, then they need to take the power of these movements seriously too. They need to look at empowered women as allies and women as these movements and instruments of progress and change. And these leaders, men and women who you'll hear about today, they need to look at themselves in the mirror and they need to say, this is what a feminist looks like. Because if they truly believe in the global goals, then they need to stand with the women who will help us and achieve these goals.